Preeti, let me come to you now with what we just heard there from Mr. Tyagarajan. And I think it was right of him to also list out some of the challenges. While we've talked about the opportunities, list out some of the challenges that the industry will have to grapple with. And to his mind, ironically, manpower is going to be one of them, which is, again, something that, in India, where you talk about this large young working population, the question of employment and employability keeps getting, talked about as well. But how do you see the ecosystem at this point in time? What are the specific opportunities that you believe you intend to leverage on? And one key challenge that you're worried about?
Wow, that's a series of questions. Thank you, Shereen. I think, just to sort of set the context, Luminous Power Technologies is at the center of the energy transition, which is decentralizing energy, decarbonizing energy as an expectation of the consumer in an incredibly digitized world. So in this sort of dynamo effect, there is at the center the customer, and the customer who wants affordable energy when a power cut happens, or an affordable solution when he wants to cut his or her bills at the end. So that ability of the manufacturing industry to drive excellence with frugal innovation at the heart of it, I think will remain critical for India. In fact, I was having a meeting this morning, and there is a lot of investors and a lot of dynamism coming towards India to say that can we do these amazing solutions. And I think what we'll learn is that yes, you can, but there is a modularity effect, a price laddering. Excellence is paid for once it's proven. Frugal innovation is paid for at scale. And I think we have to remember that when we are thinking about manufacturing. Notwithstanding that, I see the ecosystem very positively. Positive because it is pushing us. I think these import bans, so to speak, by the government are a trigger. They've created an inflection point, so the industry has to respond. It has now created an opportunity, so we have to build in some best-in-class practices. We have to adopt automation to perhaps make sure that we are doing best-in-class manufacturing work and removing hazardous work so that there is employee safety, there is sustainability, and there is productivity. We think of that in terms of, to give you a simple example, we run a PCBA line in our Baddi inverter manufacturing plant. It is an SMT unit. So in the good old days, you used to do threading of PCBs. Sorry if it's slightly technical, but I am one of those imported experts. So I've returned from Australia to India in the midst of this excitement. So when you think about an SMT line and it is fully automated, it is able to do the heat map of a PCB. So instead of looking at whether the components are laid well by operators one after the other, you now have a machine doing a heat map and working out the gaps. So as you implement a lot of that, you have to reskill your employees. So we invest a lot in digital skilling. And that's really about being relentless in grabbing that data culture, driving it. And I can tell you, it's a whole different thing in India to do it in small towns in Gagret, to do it in Baddi, to do it in Haridwar. But the good news is Indian talent is hungry. They are hungry, they want to lead, and they want to learn. I kind of call it the L-cube philosophy. You have to lead the digital DNA change as a leader. You have to lab it, which means you have to allow your leaders to experiment and lab it. And then you have to live it. You have to have the courage to experiment, implement, and then change your processes. From a manual screwdriver, you have to go to an intelligent screwdriver, and then you have to retrain your entire line to say, hey, this screwdriver is not going to allow you to take this PCB to the next step if it detects that it's wrong automatically. So look at the screen. Don't look at the guy next to you. That's how it sort of works.
One, of course, is this business of frugal innovation, and Maruti has been one of the companies at the forefront of that. But more importantly, also catering to the changing consumer trends that we are seeing. Today everyone's talking about India being the third largest economy, but we're not really focusing yet on per capita consumption. The hope and the expectation is that we'll double that as well. If that were to happen, what would that mean in terms of the kind of preferences that consumers may choose to make and companies like yours would choose to service?
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, which we have also been considering for long. Certainly the research shows that there is a inflection point at the per capita GDP level for cars when suddenly the volume shoots up and the penetration of cars per 1,000 household increases dramatically. We have seen it in Korea, Japan, Brazil, Poland, Mexico, everywhere. We have to prepare for it because while we are the third largest, as I mentioned, in passenger vehicle, but we are still 27 per thousand, and I sometimes wonder कि अगर really or inflection point nahi hai ye, to then what would happen to the scale? And it's going to be really, really huge. So we have to prepare for it. But I think a couple of things which we have to look at in the innovation front. And I think, personally, I believe that in our country, we do not have that sort of culture of innovation. And that comes because we are not experimentative. And that comes because we are like at the lower end of the per capita levels. So as it has been found that as the per capita GDP increases, you will find people getting more experimentative, including the consumers. That drives preferences for products, and that drives organizations, manufacturing, and IP generation, etc., into that direction. So we have seen it happening in automobile already to some extent. The type of body type, segment type of this thing is largely now skewed towards the SUV-ish type of body type, which is and the average on-road price is now actually between 11 to 12 lakh, which just about 7-8 years back were about 5.5 lakhs. So that's like really changing preferences. Preferences are changing for technology also, the features that you put in. For example, hybrids have become really big now, because people are now, as the
You're
GDP,
still in the hybrid camp versus the EV camp?
We will discuss that. We'll go whichever camp the consumers are in. So our camp choice is very clear. But in terms of the technology also, preferences are going, as you said, could go in any way, and we have to follow. And it has also been driven by a lot of digitalization that's happening. So the buying process also is changing. So currently, for example, we get almost the highest number of inquiries that we get is on the digital platform, which was just 2-3% about 5-6 years back. So things are changing, and we have to change accordingly.
So how different will Maruti look 5 years down the line? Are we, we've already started to see a slowing in your entry-level segment, where with the Alto and so on and so forth. Are you going to be more Jimny? Where are you going to play as far as Maruti is concerned?
Great question, and I think let me clarify to all the viewers here, as also to all the participants. Maruti Suzuki in the sub 10 lakh segment has a market share of 62%. So people say you will never going to operate in the 10 to 20 lakh segment. I'm happy to share that in the 10 to 20 lakh segment also Maruti Suzuki is the market leader today. Although the market share is not as high. It is, you talked of preference changes. In this year, we said, people said SUVs are something which we are not, we are only into hatches. You will be happy to note that in July, we were the #1 manufacturer of SUVs in the country. So things are changing. We have now just launched the Invicto, which is in the 30 lakh range, which is something which people said Maruti Suzuki would never. But this is all because we are following that camp of the consumer, wherever they are. And I think it's very importantly, not only innovation, I would have liked to, if time had permitted, would talk about innovation. But I would also like to say that brand building is also getting, because at that levels, you have to have the brand trust of consumers. If you are able to price your products and therefore have sustainable growth going forward. I think it's Maruti Suzuki 5 years down the line. I mean, first you see 5 years back what it was, and now, of course, it's a significant change. And I think 5 years later, it could be a totally different ball game altogether.
A totally different ball game altogether. Sanjay, are you prepared for this totally different ball game that Mr. Srivastava is gearing up to play? And more importantly, to Mr. Lal's point about, partnerships, technology transfer, as you look at this aspiration of looking beyond India, I mean, though the domestic opportunity today is a very large one, but if we want to move up in global trade and a share of global trade, what do you believe are likely to be the routes for that as well? How much of M&A and JVs are likely to be part of that?
Thanks, Shereen. I'm glad you asked me that question because I wanted to respond to Mr. Lal's comment on partnerships. I'm a strong believer that partnerships should be made so that you can learn technology and then go on it on your own. If you look at the Indian OEM market space, whilst the volume may be large, we're not more than 2% of global value. And therefore, playing only in the Indian market, joint ventures restrict you geographically. The aim of building a joint venture and a partnership or a technology agreement should be to learn the technology. As a business, we spend 3.5% of our revenue on R&D, and we like to play in maybe 4 or 5 products, but we want to do them really, really well. 75% to 80% of our business is outside of India in terms of exports. So we're continuously investing in R&D, and the only way you can really make money is if you can price your product better than your competitor. The only way you can do that is if your product is actually better than your competitor. And the only way you can do that is if you invest in R&D and in innovation. And that's really the mindset that companies in India and the auto component space need to have to really go global. And I think the opportunity to create a manufacturing hub for the world exists today in the auto component industry. And we need to leverage that opportunity, and we can only leverage that by investing in R&D. And I continuously talk about private sector's role being to invest in technology, learn technology. And today, I mean, for example, as a business, we have no joint ventures. We may have a product joint venture, but we don't have joint ventures because we don't want to be restricted just to the Indian market from a geography perspective.